The relationship between Iran and the United States is one of the most volatile and intricate in global politics, marked by decades of mistrust, hostility, and near conflict. The U.S., a dominant global force with over 330 million people, contrasts with Iran, a significant regional power with a population exceeding 85 million. Together, they account for roughly 5% and 1% of the world's population, respectively. For over 4 decades, these nations have had no formal diplomatic ties, and their tensions have repeatedly escalated to the edge of war. In early 2020, the assassination of a high-ranking Iranian military official by a U.S. drone strike, followed by Iran's missile attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq, brought the two perilously close to a catastrophic conflict. Fast forward to the present day, and the long-simmering tensions between Iran and the United States have once again erupted into open conflict, this time with Israel deeply entrenched in the fight. What was once a shadow war of sanctions, cyber attacks, and proxy militias has now spilled into direct military confrontation, drawing the region and the world to the brink of a wider war. Understanding the roots of this animosity requires exploring their shared history, which stretches back to the early 20th century. In the 1900s, Iran's vast oil reserves were uncovered, positioning it as a potential energy giant with some of the world's largest proven deposits. British interests quickly moved to exploit this resource, establishing a partnership through the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. However, the agreement heavily favored Britain, allocating Iran only a small fraction of the profits, about 20%, while the British reaped the lion's share. By the 1930s, this lopsided arrangement fueled resentment in Iran as the company became a cornerstone of Britain's economic empire, controlling virtually all of Iran's oil production. During World War II, Iran's strategic location near the Soviet Union and its oil wealth made it a focal point for the Allies. Despite Iran's declared neutrality, its leader, the Shah, was suspected of sympathies toward Nazi Germany. Fearing Iran might align with the Axis powers, potentially threatening Soviet oil fields and British interests, the Allies, Britain and the Soviet Union, invaded in 1941. Overwhelmed, Iran surrendered swiftly, and the Shah was replaced by his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, seen as more pliable by the Allies. Iran was occupied throughout the war, serving as a vital supply route for Allied forces, with tens of thousands of American troops stationed there to facilitate aid to the Soviet Union. After the war, the Allies withdrew, but Britain's grip on Iran's oil persisted, reigniting local discontent. By the early 1950s, Iranian frustration with the unfair profit sharing and lack of transparency in the oil company boiled over. In 1951, Iran's elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the oil industry, a move that unified the country but provoked Britain's wrath. Britain imposed a crippling oil embargo, and in 1953, with U.S. support, orchestrated a coup to oust Mossadegh. The coup, which left hundreds dead, reinstalled the Shah as a near-absolute ruler, cementing his image as a Western-backed autocrat. This intervention sowed deep anti-American sentiment in Iran, as the Shah's regime aligned closely with U.S. interests during the Cold War. The Shah's pro-Western policies, including strong ties with Israel and a push for secular modernization, alienated many Iranians, particularly the working class, leftists, and religious conservatives. His secret police suppressed dissent, exiling figures like Ayatollah Khomeini and imprisoning thousands. By the late 1970s, widespread unrest culminated in the 1979 Islamic Revolution, a tragic fire in a cinema blamed variably on the Shah's forces or insurgents, and deadly crackdowns on protesters fueled public outrage. Millions demanded the Shah's ouster, and in 1979, he fled. Ayatollah Khomeini returned to lead a new Islamic republic, a Shia theocracy hostile to the U.S. and Israel, executing opponents and upending Iran's foreign policy. The revolution stunned the U.S., transforming a key ally into a fierce adversary. When the U.S. admitted the Shah for medical treatment, Iran demanded his extradition, fearing another Western-backed coup. In November 1979, Iranian students seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran, holding 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. A failed U.S. rescue mission in 1980 which killed 8 American soldiers, deepened the crisis. Diplomatic relations were severed, and tensions worsened when Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, invaded Iran in 1980, exploiting Iran's post-revolutionary chaos. The U.S., viewing Iran as a threat, supported Iraq with weapons and intelligence, prolonging a brutal 8-year war that killed hundreds of thousands, including many Iranians, due to Iraq's use of chemical weapons. Throughout the 1980s, U.S.-Iran relations deteriorated further. The U.S. accused Iran of sponsoring terrorism through groups like Hezbollah, which bombed the U.S. Embassy and a Marine barracks in Lebanon in 1983, killing hundreds. In 1988, a U.S. naval operation destroyed Iranian oil platforms and ships after an American vessel hit an Iranian mine. That same year, a U.S. warship mistakenly shot down an Iranian civilian airliner, killing 290 people. An incident Iran viewed as deliberate. These events, coupled with U.S. sanctions and Iran's support for anti-American militias, entrenched mutual hostility. The 1990s saw no thaw. Iran's backing of Hezbollah, blamed for attacks like the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia, killing 19 U.S. airmen, kept tensions high. The U.S. tightened sanctions, isolating Iran economically. After September 11th, President Bush's axis of evil speech, naming Iran alongside Iraq and North Korea, signaled unrelenting hostility. Iran, fearing a U.S. invasion like Iraq's in 2003, accelerated its nuclear program, viewing it as a deterrent against regime change. The U.S. responded with diplomatic pressure and covert operations to curb Iran's ambitions. By the 2010s, cyber warfare emerged. The U.S. and Israel allegedly deployed the Stuxnet virus, damaging Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran retaliated with cyber attacks on U.S. banks and infrastructure. Yet a diplomatic breakthrough came in 2015 with the Iran nuclear deal under Obama, lifting sanctions for Iran's nuclear compliance. This fragile détente collapsed when Trump exited the deal in 2018, imposing maximum pressure sanctions that crippled Iran's economy, pushing it toward defiance. In 2021, indirect talks to revive the nuclear deal began under President Biden, but progress stalled amid mutual distrust. Iran's support for proxies, like Yemen's Houthis attacking U.S. allies and U.S. airstrikes on Iran-backed militias in Syria, kept the cycle of retaliation alive. By 2023, Iran's alleged role in drone attacks on U.S. bases and its uranium enrichment nearing weapons-grade levels raised alarms. The U.S. bolstered its Gulf presence, deploying warships to counter Iranian naval threats. The Israel-Hamas conflict in 2023 further complicated matters. Iran's backing of Hamas and Hezbollah, coupled with U.S. support for Israel, intensified proxy wars. Skirmishes in the Red Sea, where Iran-aligned groups targeted U.S. and Israeli-linked ships, risked broader escalation. Diplomatic efforts faltered as Iran demanded sanctions relief, while the U.S. insisted on verifiable nuclear rollback. Hardliners in both nations, emboldened by domestic politics, undermined compromise. In the hot shadow of early June 2025, the region trembled once again. It began not with an invasion, but with whispers and wings of steel. Israeli jets, under the codename Operation Rising Lion, soared over the night skies of Iran. With precision honed by years of covert operations and Mossad intelligence, they struck deep, targeting nuclear facilities, missile launchers, and senior commanders of the Revolutionary Guard. And then came the Americans. Within days, the United States, citing the escalation and a critical threat to its allies, unleashed its bunker-busting arsenal. Facilities in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan were hit. The message was clear: the nuclear clock would not be allowed to tick unchecked. Tehran responded as expected with fury. Iran's missiles rained down on Israeli soil and American bases in Qatar. President Donald Trump, in a rare moment of restraint, brokered a fragile ceasefire. By June 24th, after 12 days of fire and fallout, the guns quieted. But beneath the silence, nothing had truly healed, as both Israel and Iran broke the ceasefire after just a few hours. Thanks for diving into this deep dive on U.S.-Iran tensions with us here at Frontline Political. If you found this history eye-opening, hit that like button and subscribe for more breakdowns of the world's biggest conflicts. Drop a comment below and let us know how you think this conflict will end. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next one.